Division of labor, a process where we assign different parts of a task to different people to increase efficiency. Do we realize how smooth and efficient work is when we specify the roles of people doing a job? Nobody is made to do the next person's work, and everybody's role is clearly defined. Imagine that this happens in government. Imagine a government where every arm of government works in unison with each other and everybody's duty is clearly defined. Power is not concentrated in one arm, but it is shared for effective running of society. While it happens, it is called separation of powers. In 1748, a French author, Baron de Montesquieu, in his book, The Spirit of the Law, formulated the doctrine of separation of powers. The principle of separation of powers states that the function of the three arms of government should be performed by different persons, and each arm of government must function separately. Do not forget that the three arms of government are the legislature, judiciary, and executive. In the doctrine of separation of powers, the duty of the legislature is to make laws. The duty of the judiciary is to deliberate and decide on the application of the law to particular cases, or simply say, interpret the law. The executive, on the other hand, effects the decision of the two arms, or simply put, execute law. In the doctrine of separation of powers, members of the judiciary should not be members of the legislative or executive, and members of the executive should not be members of the legislature or judiciary. That's right. This also applies to legislators. When the doctrine of separation of powers is in place, any decision that is made in government will be well thought out. This will also protect the rights of the citizens, as there won't be room for dictatorship. Since power does not rest on one person or arm of the government, it becomes impossible to abuse what you do not have total control of. Separation of power also promotes a democratic process. Power is clearly separated, and citizens will be able to elect lawmakers to represent them and make laws for the progress of society and democracy. They will also elect members of the executive. This will lead to people involved in the electoral process, thus promoting democracy. Also, separation of powers ensures the freedom and liberty of citizens. When power is clearly separated, the role and powers of the judiciary is clearly defined, leading to citizens seeking justice whenever their rights have been abused. However, separation of power has its downsides too. These downsides can also be called the drawbacks of separation of power. It is important to also note that where the principle of separation of power is effective, the decision-making process is slow. This is because there is always a rigid process of making and amending laws. Power cannot be delegated, and it consumes resources and time. Separation of power is commonly practiced in a presidential system. Do not forget that where there is a separation of power, just like in division of labor, functions and powers of the three arms of government are clearly defined. I hope to see you in the next lesson, where we expand on this principle under checks and balance. Bye for now.